The clock struck midnight, casting an eerie blue glow across the room. I sat huddled on the couch, the faint flicker of the television providing a feeble sense of comfort. My parents were away, and the isolation of the house settled in around me like a suffocating fog. I glanced out the window, the darkness outside seeming impenetrable. The wind howled, rattling the trees and sending a chill down my spine. I shook off the unease, reminding myself that I was an adult and there was nothing to fear. But then a soft scratching sound echoed from somewhere outside the living room. I froze, my heart pounding as I strained to hear more. The scratching grew more insistent, like claws against wood. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the noise, a stray animal perhaps, or a tree branch against the window. But then the scratching moved, as if circling the house. Panic clenched my chest as I realized that whatever was making that sound was not outside, it was inside the house. My breath hitched, and I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed 911. I whispered my address, my voice barely audible, as I clung to the lifeline on the other end of the line. "I think there's someone in my house." The operator's calm voice did little to quell the terror that surged through me. She assured me that help was on the way, but every passing second felt like an eternity. The scratching continued, growing closer, the sound of it echoing down the hallway. I held my breath, my body tense as I strained to listen. The scratching seemed to be right outside the living room door now. My eyes darted around searching for a weapon, anything to defend myself with. My gaze fell on a heavy vase on the coffee table, and I grabbed it, clutching it tightly in my trembling hands. The doorknob jiggled, and my heart raced as I watched it turn slowly. The door creaked open, revealing a sliver of darkness beyond. My grip tightened on the vase, and I took a hesitant step forward, my voice quivering as I called out, "Who's there?" No response, only the sinister silence that seemed to swallow the room. I took another step, my pulse thundering in my ears. And then a figure emerged from the darkness, an intruder dressed in tattered clothes, their face obscured by shadows. My voice wavered, but I forced strength into my words. "I've called the police. They're on their way." The intruder's lips curled into a chilling smile, a glint of malice in their eyes. They took a step closer, and I brandished the vase, my voice shaking but determined. "Stay back." The intruder's laugh sent a shiver down my spine, their amusement at my feeble attempts to defend myself apparent. With a sudden, swift movement, they lunged towards me, and I swung the vase wildly, the sound of shattering glass echoing through the room. The intruder stumbled back, clutching their arm, where a piece of the vase had struck them. Blood trickled between their fingers, but their smile remained, unnerving and unsettling. Fear coursed through my veins, and I turned to run, my heart pounding as I sprinted towards the front door. I flung it open and stumbled out into the night, the cold air hitting me like a shock. The sound of sirens grew louder, and relief flooded over me as police cars screeched to a halt in front of the house. Officers rushed towards me, their flashlights illuminating the darkness. I gasped out the situation, my words a jumble of fear and desperation. The intruder was nowhere to be seen, vanished into the night. The police searched the house, but there was no sign of them, only the lingering sense of violation that hung heavy in the air. Days turned into weeks, and I found it impossible to shake the feeling of being watched. The scratches on the walls, the broken vase, the remnants of that night were a constant reminder of the intrusion. Sleep became elusive, each creak of the house sending me into a state of heightened alertness. The investigation yielded no leads, and though I tried to convince myself that the intruder was gone, I couldn't escape the sense that they were still out there, lurking in the shadows. Every sound, every shadow, left me paralyzed with fear, haunted by the memory of that night. Even after my parents returned, the house held a different kind of darkness, a space tainted by the intrusion. And as the nights grew longer, I couldn't help but wonder if the intruder would return, a chilling presence that had shattered my sense of safety and left me forever haunted. The night was pitch black, and the silence of the house was suffocating. My parents were away on a business trip, leaving me home alone for the first time. I tried to shake off the unease that crept up my spine as I settled into the living room surrounded by the eerie glow of the television. As the hours passed, the wind outside grew more insistent, rattling windows and sending unsettling whispers through the trees. I dismissed it as my imagination, blaming the horror movies I had binged earlier in the evening. But then, I heard it, a faint creak from the hallway, as if a floorboard had been stepped on. My heart raced, and I glanced around searching for the source of the noise. The television flickered and cast eerie shadows on the walls, playing tricks on my mind. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone, ready to dial 911 if needed. I chalked it up to my nerves, thinking that perhaps my imagination was running wild. But then the unmistakable sound of shuffling reached my ears. The cold sweat on my forehead seemed to freeze as panic tightened its grip on my chest. I held my breath, straining my ears to catch any further noise. The seconds stretched into minutes, and just as I began to convince myself that it was all in my head, I heard a soft thud coming from the kitchen. My mind raced as I considered my options. Should I lock myself in the bathroom and call for help? Or should I confront whatever was lurking in the shadows? I opted for the latter, a surge of courage propelling me to my feet. I grabbed a heavy book from the coffee table, my makeshift weapon, and tiptoed towards the kitchen. The darkness seemed to press in around me as I reached the doorway. The moonlight filtering through the window provided little illumination, and I strained to make out any movement. Suddenly, a shadow darted across the floor, and my heart leapt into my throat. I held my breath, listening intently. A low chuckle echoed through the room, sending shivers down my spine. My pulse quickened, and I raised the book, ready to strike at any moment. The intruder's presence was palpable, a malevolent force that seemed to seep into every corner of the house. I called out in a shaky voice, my attempt at bravado barely masking my fear. "Who's there?" The silence that followed was more terrifying than any response could have been. I backed away slowly, my eyes never leaving the shadowy corners of the room. And then, in an instant, a figure emerged from the darkness, an indistinguishable silhouette that sent a chill down my spine. My voice trembled as I spoke again, my attempt at assertiveness faltering. "I've called the police. They're on their way." The figure didn't respond, its silence somehow more menacing than any words it could have uttered. It took a step closer, and I stumbled back, my heart pounding like a drum. The moonlight glinted off something in its hand, a glimmering blade that sent a jolt of terror through me. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and sprinted towards the front door. My fingers fumbled with the locks, and I swung the door open, the cool night air hitting me like a wave of relief. But before I could take a step outside, a hand grabbed my shoulder, yanking me back into the house. I screamed, my voice echoing through the empty rooms as I struggled against the intruder's grip. I kicked and thrashed, my fear-fueled strength surprising even me. The intruder grunted in frustration, the blade falling from their hand as they fought to restrain me. In a moment of desperation, I lunged for the fallen weapon, my fingers closing around the hilt. With a surge of determination, I swung the blade wildly, connecting with the intruder's arm. They let out a cry of pain and stumbled back, blood oozing from the wound. Seizing the opportunity, I sprinted towards the front door again, growing it open and stumbling out onto the porch. The flashing lights of police cars illuminated the darkness, and I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. Officers rushed towards me, their guns drawn, as I frantically pointed back towards the house. The intruder was apprehended moments later, taken away in handcuffs. As the adrenaline wore off, I found myself shaking uncontrollably, the reality of what had just transpired sinking in. My home, my sanctuary, had been invaded by a sinister presence. And though I had emerged physically unscathed, the scars left on my psyche would take far longer to heal. From that night on, the house held a different kind of darkness, a lingering shadow of fear and vulnerability. Even with my parents returning, the memory of that night remained etched in my mind. And as the wind howled outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was never truly alone in the house, haunted by the echoes of that fateful night.